on lesson 28 in Unit 3, Games and Animations, in the Computer Science Discoveries course in code.org. If you've made it to this point, this should be the fun part. We have covered all of the things we need to know to be able to make your own game. So this is where you don't really have a lot of instruction. You have some suggestions, but this is where it should really get fun. So this video is just going to be an example. It's going to be quick. It's not going to be perfect, but just to point out a few things that might help as you work on your game. One is the student resources page, which if you click right here on that purple button, you should see that. For my students, the activity guide, the rubric, and the student checklist would be things I would point out. If you want a paper copy of the activity guide, let me know. I'll be happy to make one for you. It does provide some organization, especially at this point where you're having to plan everything out. So you can kind of describe like what you want your game to be. Think about your different backgrounds. It gives you room to sketch it out. Think about what sprites you might need, what the images would be, different positions. So this can be really helpful to just help you break down the different requirements. So that said, I don't require my students to turn it in, but I do think it's useful to use. The rubric is going to point out what's required, but I think it's done better. So if you have a chance, just look that over. Obviously, to get full credit, you need to check all the boxes in the extensive evidence column. Let's just make sure you've done that. But really what's going to be the most helpful probably is this student checklist. And this is where I want to go over so you understand what you really need. In my class, I don't really pay attention to grading this. It's a long story, but just kind of starting with program development, making sure that you use good naming conventions, that you don't just have, sprite 1, sprite 2, sprite 3. You have, player or enemy or things like that. So proper naming conventions. Your program is sequenced well, so things are in the order they need to be in to appear as it should. You use at least 3 functions created outside the draw loop, which are used to organize your code into logical segments, and at least one of your functions is called multiple times in the program. I will allow a little bit of flexibility there when I'm grading. If you have a great game, and sometimes there's just not a need to do that, so I don't want you making a function for the sake of making a function. But if you have a lot of repeated code or something that's repeated multiple times in your draw loop, that is where we would want to make sure you meet that requirement. For the algorithms and control, you need at least 3 backgrounds. One example would be a start screen, a game screen, and an end screen. That's kind of the easiest way to do that, or a start screen and then a background that changes once a certain score is reached. We've done examples of that already. So the one that your game has at least one background change that is triggered automatically through a variable. That could be a game over screen, like if your health gets too low, or like a you win screen if your score reaches a certain point. Or it could just simply be a different background. Your game responds to at least 2 different types of user input. So that could be the mouse, it could be your arrow keys, ASWD, whatever keys you want to use. And then almost towards the end, your game includes multiple conditionalistic controls. So basically, you are going to have, is touching, some bounce, some collide, basically some of those complex movements are involved. And the complex sprites either affect the sprites themselves or the gameplay. This one, your game includes complex movements such as acceleration, moving in a curve, or jumping. If you at least have some velocity, I count that as acceleration. So if you have, or even if you use certain sprite interactions, I kind of count that. And the example I'm going to use, there's not really a need to do the acceleration, like a velocity plus or minus a velocity. So that one I grade a little bit more flexibly. And then lastly, you need at least 2 variables. So pretty much everything in this checklist for my students, we're going to, I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway for the position and movement part, and a little bit of leeway on the function being called multiple times, just depending on what your code looks like. Okay, so with that said, we can go in and there are some sample games that you could play. I've had great games over the years that have been created by students. I've had people try to recreate common games, like this one is actually an example I'm going to show you. It's not one from one of my students, but I've had similar ones for Pong. There's also been people have recreated Space Invaders. I had one student in the first year I taught the course that basically recreated the first level of Mario. That one was insane. It was a couple thousand lines of code. I don't suggest anybody do that. It was impressive. So start thinking outside the box. Think of what you might want to do. I'm going to click on example C, and I'm just going to sort of walk through what this one does and how to kind of make that work. So this one, you start out and very nice. It gives us a info screen, kind of a start screen. It says press space to start. And then we have got kind of a version of Pong. It's called Alien Soccer. And you can, obviously 2 players can play this, which is kind of cool. You see the score changing. And because there are 2 players, there's a red score and a blue score, so that would meet the requirement of 2 different variables. So, again, just a few things. And you can kind of see there's some barriers there. Also, like a little animation is changing when the player touches the ball. It's kind of quick. So I could keep going, but basically if you play this and you get up, one player gets up to 30, the game will end and you'll see a game over screen. So while this one looks pretty easy, so your player can move up, down, left to right. Also, I've mostly been moving the blue, but you can control the red with the WASD controls. So I'm going to try to recreate this game on the fly. If I was smart, I would use a planning guide and think about it, but I'm going to try to just roll with it and wing it. So I'm going to click finish, and I'm going to continue. So right here I have create your variables here, create your sprites here, draw background, update sprites, create your functions. Okay, so I'm going from memory from what I just saw. I need to have a couple of characters. I am going to flash back to my days in elementary school when we used to play something called Crab Soccer, and I'm going to make a version of Crab Soccer. Okay, and I am going to have a Crab Red. I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to call this Crab Blue. And for this one, I'm going to go to my paint bucket tool. I'm going to click that. I'm going to come over here to my primary. I'm going to click. I'm going to hover over to a shade of blue. I'm going to pick a blue that doesn't really matter that much, but okay. And then I'm going to fill in, and for the most part, that will make the crab blue. Okay, so I've got 2 characters that I'm going to use there. All right. Next, I am going to create my sprites. I'm going a little bit out of order, so I'm going to have sprite 1, set animation, sprite 2, set animation. Okay, so this is going to be player 1, and I'm going to make player 1 the red crab, and player 2 will be the blue crab. Right now we have draw sprites on screen. I'm probably going to need to scale each one because we've used that crab before. So I'm going to scale player 1 to 0.3, and I'm going to scale player 2 to 0.3. I'm going to start player 1 at 5200. I'm going to start player 2 at 350, 200. I forgot the 2 there. All right, and I'm gonna run. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so I've got my 2 characters. All right, now I need a soccer ball. So I'm going to go back to animations. Now this one, some of you may say, "Oh, could you do a goal, do that as a background?" I actually could do that. That would give me another sprite, and it does kind of give me some ideas. So I'm actually going to do that. So I kind of make that decision on the fly, which is okay. And I'm going to call this soccer BG for soccer background. And then I'm going to do another one for a soccer ball. And I'm just going to call this one ball. Okay. So I need to create, because I had a background, I'm going to just call this BG1 and ball. I'm going to set the animation of BG1 to be that soccer background. I'm going to set the animation for ball to be the ball. And player 1 hasn't been declared yet. I must have accidentally deleted that. We'll fix that. Okay. And I probably need to scale the ball. I'm going to scale the ball to 0.3 as well. Okay. And that's still pretty big. So I think I must have accidentally changed the ball. So that needed to be 50. I'm going to put the ball in the middle at 200, 200. And let's scale that to 0.1. There we go. Okay, so we have a soccer ball in the middle. But now that I've got this version, I am going to change where I put my player. So I'm actually going to put player 1 up top. So player 1 is now going to get a 200x and a 50y. Player 2 is going to get 200x and a 350y. Okay, now they're kind of defending their various areas. So I know that's a lot of setup, and that's just my first background, but just bear with me. Okay, so I've got a background in already, so we're at right here where it says draw background. I am going to also have a kind of a directions screen. So for that, I am going to have a conditional. And I'm going to check, again, there's a check for the old saying for the least, most specific case first. So I'm just going to say if score is greater, or actually I need to do if, I haven't gotten there yet, but if I'm just going to do a P1 score is greater, I'm just going to do the first one to 10, or P2 score greater than 10. So basically you have to get to 11 is what I'm getting at. I don't know why I won't. Okay. So those are my conditions I'm going to test. I need some variables for that. So I'm going to set P1 score to 0. I'm going to copy that, paste, make that P2. Set that to 0. I'm going to have another variable, and I'm going to call this just clicks, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. and I'm going to say else if clicks is dead equal to 0. All right, then I'll have my else, okay? Now where this is going to possibly get a little crazy. I don't think I actually need... I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. That background sprite always makes things a little tricky. So this is going to be, I'm just going to go ahead and have a function, I believe, is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to call this game over. And this one is going to be directions. Okay. And I think I can leave it at that. What I'm going to have to do, though, is actually move that down here. So that was what I was trying to think. Because my background's a sprite, I need this to be over the sprites. So if one of the players gets more than 10 or they get to 11, or like my beginning screen, I want that to be over everything. So what I'm going to do now is create the directions, and this is going to be really basic. My background is going to be black. I'm then going to have a fill that is white. I'm going to have some text. Actually, I'm going to do a text size and a text font, and then I'll have my actual text. And I'm going to start it at 0.15, but then I'm going to go 350, 350. And this was going to be a pain, and I can fix it later, or I could. Actually, let me get rid of those parameters. Let me do that at 50. I also need a variable for clicks if I don't already. 0. Okay. So let me reset and run. Okay, so I do have welcome to Crab Soccer. Okay, so I'm going to make that a 24. I need to move that down to probably 25. And this is where it's a little bit nitpicky, but you want to try to make it look nice. Okay, then I'm going to have another text. Arrow keys. So I'd start that at 60, 40. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so I can move that back. Okay, and then I can have another one, Control C. Player 2 controls. WASD. Alright, we want that to be let's make that at about 80. Let's add oh. Okay, and then we're gonna do one more or two more. First to 11 wins. We'll do that at 50, at about 110. Okay, and obviously if I was doing this for a grade, I would fancy it up. I'd probably do some boxes and all that, but I'm more concerned with the time right now, so press space to begin. We'll move that one down a good bit. Okay. So again, I could kind of line everything up if I wanted to at 40 if we think that might look better. Okay, and then I could make that 55, 85, 115, just to make it a little bit more uniform. Okay. So I've got all that there. Okay, I'm going to really get rid of that comment. Okay, I need a conditional. And I'm going to say if, we're going to do key went down, space, then clicks is going to equal 1. Okay, I don't even have to do a counter pattern. And because of that, I should be able to get to this. Okay, now I also need a game over screen. So I'm actually going to copy directions. And I'm just going to do the first player to 11 win, but okay, let me paste that. I'm going to call this game over. And I'm going to have an if statement that really, let's say if P1 score is greater than 10, then I'm just going to say player 1 wins. Okay. Else, if I get to that screen, it should be because somebody won, and we'll deal with that later. Player 2 wins. Okay. So let's reset, run. I'm going to press space. Okay, and it says line 21, you left a parameter empty. Let's see what I did. Oh, that didn't save. Clicks should equal 1. Okay. Let's try it again. Space, and that takes me to my gameplay. Okay, now I'm going to do this. Because I had that score set to be greater than, if I start this and give player 1 a score of 11 and I run it, I get player 1 wins. Okay, so I know that's working. Just kind of weird if I press space. Okay, that one's still going to overshadow it. And there's a way I could build it to restart each time, but I'll get away from that. So we could just reset and start over. It'll be easier. This is an intro class. Okay, so I've kind of got my backgrounds set up. I've got 3 different backgrounds. Now notice I didn't really set a background 3, but it is taken care of by that sprite in there. Okay, so now I want to, why is it refusing to save when I put something in? Okay. All right, so now I'm going to have a function that I'm going to call player 1 controls, and it is going to be a bunch of key downs. All right, I'll do up, do down, and then we've got left and right. Okay, and then we'll have a sprite.x, which does not go with up or down, it goes with left and right. All right, this is going to be okay. All right, so we're just going to update these as we go that we've done so many times throughout. Just make sure your X's and Y's are with the appropriate directions here. And I just realized for down I made a goof. That should be a +3. So I can go into text mode and fix that. Okay, so make sure you got that. Okay, and then to the right. Okay. So that's player 1 controls. I'm now going to copy. And I'm going to call this player 2 controls. And everywhere I have a player 1, I'm going to make it player 2. And I also need to change the keys. So for up, I'm going to make that W. For down, I'm going to make that S. For left, we're going to make that A. And for right, I'm going to make that D. Okay. Then inside the draw loop, I can call the function player 1 controls, player 2 controls, reset, run, press space, and I can move this one. Okay, I can move that one. Okay. Next, what do we want to do? Let's set some boundaries. So I'm going to create some border sprites. Okay, and I'm going to make them invisible, but they are going to be there. So I'm going to create a sprite. I'm just going to call it left. I'm going to create a sprite. I'm going to call it right. I'm going to create a sprite. I'm going to call it top. Bottom. I'm also going to call one center. Okay. Now this is where it's created. So for the left one, I want to create it at 0, 200. For the right, 400, 200. For the top, 200, 0. For the bottom, 0. Actually, 200, 400. All right, and I believe I can go ahead and do the width and the height as well. Okay, so I want left to have a width of 1 and a height of 400. Right, I want a width of 1, a height of 400. Top, I want a width of 400, a height of 1. Bottom, I want a width of 400, and a height of 1. In the center, I want a width of 400 and a height of 1. Okay. Now if I reset and run, okay, you can kind of see that center line there. Okay, so I'm going to move all of these above where I created the players and the ball, so those will go right after the background. So now the ball is over it. And now I can kind of create boundaries. So this does take a little while, you can see as we're going, but next thing I'm going to do is create a function called boundaries. Okay. And then
Have a good day.
all right, you too. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to call boundaries before I'm done with it, just to make sure it's going to work. So what I should be able to do is now I press space. Okay, and that does not let, so my player 1 can't go off screen. Also, I'm not going to be able to cross the center line. Okay, so now that I know that works, I can just copy most of that and just update it to player 2, with the exception of the where I have top for player 1. I want to make that the bottom for player 2. Okay. Now, also within boundaries, I want the ball even though I haven't done anything with it yet. I want the ball to bounce off of any of those except for center. So I'm going to have ball bounce off top. I'm going to have top, bottom, left, and right. Okay. And just to also add something I need to, with the ball, we're going to start it with an initial velocity going towards player 1. It's got a velocity y of, let's do -2. So let's run space. Yeah, we don't have anything really impacting it right now, but it should bounce off. Okay, so we've got that going. Okay, now obviously we probably want to make that a little bit faster. Okay, so those are our boundaries. Now we're going to have a function for kicking, and we are going to have some more bounce off. And let's put kicking Okay, so right now I can go back and forth, but there isn't really a directional change. So what I'm gonna do is just sort of randomize it with everything. So I'm gonna have another function, or I'm actually gonna throw this in kicking, and I'm gonna have a if and I'm gonna do a is touching. If the ball is touching player 1, then the ball's velocity x is going to get a random number from -5 to 5. Okay, I'm going to copy that. If it's touching player 2, same thing. If it's touching the top, same thing. If it's touching the bottom, same thing. So basically, if the ball touches the top, the bottom, or either player, then it's going to get a random XY velocity. Now, where I do want to make it a little bit different, I'm gonna have left. So if it touches on the left side, I want it to go only to the right. So that's going to be a positive velocity. So that's going to be somewhere between 2 and 5. And then if it touches the right side, I want it to go back left. So I'm going to do from -5 to -2. Okay, I know that's a lot, but let's run it now. Press space. Up, and it broke. Okay, let's try it again. All right, let's run it. Press space. Begin. There we go. Kind of some crazy kicking. We see it slow down a little bit. It's bouncing, bouncing. And we essentially have our desired purpose. Okay. So that pretty much is our gameplay. And now at this point, we want to have a function called show score. All right, and that is going to involve some text. All right, that's going to be player 1, and we're going to go outside of that and do plus score. We're going to put that in the top left. Player 2, and I think I had, did I do P1 and P2 score, or play? That's where I have to, P1 score, okay. So that would be P1 score, that would be P2 score. Okay, and here's what I'm going to do to also get this right. So with my backgrounds, I was eventually I'm going to have an else, and I will only show score while I'm on the active gameplay. But it should work. So now it's not showing. I press space. Okay, you can see the score is very, very slowly showing up. So I need to fix some things with show score. So that is going to be at, let's do it 10, 20, and let's do this at 3, 20, 20. Let's go ahead and also change the fill to white, and let's make it a little bit bigger. So let's make the text size, let's make that a 18. Okay, and now we can see the scores. So also looking at that, because my lines are white, I may want to fix that, and I'm actually going to do something unconventional. I'm going to get rid of the space between player and the number, but that should help. And instead of that, I'm going to do yellow. All right, and there we go. We can kind of see it a little bit better. I'm going to shift that over to 300, and I want to make that a 24. So again, kind of playing around with it. I can see my player 1 score. Player 2 needs to be shifted over more. Let's do a 270. Okay. So I'm going to go back now that's a little bit bigger and put the space between the player and the number. All right, one more time. Okay, so I've got the score. Okay. Now I'm going to have one last function called update score, and I'm going to say let's see, if, and it's going to be a is touching, if the ball is touching the top. Alrighty, and that is the end of my time I have, so I'm going to have to edit this video. I do apologize for the length, but I will continue on with addition to this video. Alright, pardon the glitch there. I was stopped by the bell. I had to teach a class, and we're getting back to it. So what I was working on, and hopefully it'll be more smooth with my transition of combining the videos, but we are trying to figure out a way to update the score. So we're going to say if the ball is touching the top sprite, then that means player 2 is down here, so that would mean player 2's score should increase. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to also go ahead and get that pesky requirement about calling a function twice. We're going to create another function called setBall. And what we're going to do with setBall is we are going to set the ball's x, y at 200, 200, and then we are, after it's set there, we're then going to give it a y velocity that is going, which could cause a glitch. I'm trying to think of the best way to do it. Well, for simplicity's sake, we'll just always kick it to the top. So we'll just give it a y velocity of 5. Okay, and that will be for the ball. Okay, and then we will, actually, you know what? I can do that later. So I figured out a better way. There we go. So if it's touching the top, I'm going to call setBall. Okay, and then I am going to also, so if it touched the top, that means the bottom player scored. So we're going to let the ball go to the center and then go back towards the player that scored. So we will give it a positive velocity in that case. So ball will get a velocity of 5. Okay. And then we're also going to update P2 score is going to get P2 score +1. Okay, and let me just double check that my player 1 is at the top and player 2 is at the bottom. That's right. Okay, so I'm then going to copy that if statement, paste it, and change it to if it's touching the bottom, then we're going to set the ball player 1's score will increase. So in this case, player 1 is the one that scored, so we're going to give the ball back, and that will be a -5 velocity. Okay, so now we're going to call update score inside our draw loop. Okay, and now we can run this game. We press space. Okay, so something. So my score is not updating. So we want to figure out why. So what we might have to do is move, get rid of these bounce offs for the top and bottom. And let's try that and see if, okay, there we go. And now, okay, now we've got some scoring going on. Okay. Now, if we wanted to get really particular, we could zero it in to only count the score if the ball goes in the little goal area, but just for simplicity's sake, we'll leave it as it is. So we're going to keep playing until somebody hopefully gets 11. And just for a little extra fun, okay, player 2 wins. All right, now of course you see that little glitch. It's not perfect, but essentially that would be a game I could turn in. This is also possibly a conflict. There's a redefinition. So apparently there's something in code.org called top. It's working. It's just saying that's a redefinition. So if I was needing to use that later, that might be an issue. But overall, it's working. So we finished it. Took about an hour, 150 lines of code. But we have a project. This would check all the boxes. We've got 2 sprites that are interactive. We've got a background sprite that is kind of there, and it has some properties that we set. We've got some boundary sprites that we can't really see, but they're there. We've got the ball as a sprite. So we've got about 10 sprites. My math may be off a little bit. We've got different interactions. We've got some bounce off. We've got some collide. We've got some velocities, change in direction. So we've got everything we need with this one, as well as with the variables with the 2 different player scores. We've got 3 backgrounds. We had our start screen, our play screen, and our end screen. So end of the day, this one would meet all the requirements. I look forward to seeing what everybody creates.